Good evening all. Welcome to Carrow Road. It was a must-not-lose game. Norwich City's head coach, Dean Smith, had said that ahead of this game. They have lost 3-1 to Brentford in an incident-packed game with VAR decisions, disallowed goals, plenty of contentious decisions. It was quite anxious and fractious at times. Certainly in the stands, there were plenty of boos today. Norwich are at rock bottom, but what makes it so much worse is the depressing familiarity of it all. My colleague Adam compared this game to the 3-0 defeat to Sunderland in 2016, and that's a really fitting comparison when Big Sam was giving it the big one, wasn't he? After they really dumped Norwich into trouble that day. Norwich are heading back to the Championship. It's looking almost certain with 11 games remaining. Here on Thursday night, against the world and European champions Chelsea for that hastily rearranged game is pretty cruel, and only a shock is going to change an increasingly depressing narrative. And then Norwich go to Leeds on Sunday. They lost 1-0 at Leicester today, and by all accounts put in a pretty decent attempt for their new manager, Jesse Marsch. They've obviously made the change, got rid of Marcelo Bielsa to try and make sure that they stay clear of relegation trouble. If Norwich lose those two matches, they then go into a 3-week break without any games. They will come back with 9 games to play. Does that sound familiar? Project Restart. This time with fans. And this horrible defeat, painful defeat, probably just gave us a little bit of insight into what's to come, because the stadium was nearly half empty by the time 8 added minutes had been completed. And I think people are probably going to get pretty angry if this is the way that they're going to go down. At the moment, they've got fewer points than they had at this stage 2 years ago. They have lost to a direct rival at home. It could have been worse. There's just no sugarcoating it. It's a bit of a disastrous day. There are no positives to take from it other than maybe John Rowe, which I'll come back to, who did at least set up the consolation goal late on and showed some urgency, although Brentford had kind of switched to consolidation mode by that point, but fair play to the lad. 3-1. Ivan Toney gets his hat-trick. 2 of them were penalties, both conceded by Ben Gibson. The second one perhaps more contentious than the second one. Tammy Pukki did score in the second added minute to at least get a goal, which Norwich probably did deserve. And that's the narrative of this, is that they did have chances. Dean Smith didn't make changes at half-time, even though it was 0-0, because I think he'd seen enough to stick with the 11 he'd gone with. He brought Tim Krul back in to goal. He dropped Max Aarons to the bench and played Sam Byram at right back. Otherwise, it was the same team that had played at Southampton in the league. So that meant McLean and Gilmore staying in midfield with Matthias Norman, Sargent on the right, with Schitzer on the left, Pukki up top, and the rest of the defence as you kind of expect. But the big moment of the game came in just the second minute. Billy Gilmore makes an interception of a Brentford clearance. Quick 1-2 with McLean. Plays for Schitzer clean through on goal. All he's got to do is beat David Raya. And he almost, I guess he's trying to give him the eyes. He's trying to send him the wrong way. But he just ends up poking a very, very tame effort, which the Brentford keeper could claim. That should have been 1-0 in the second minute. Imagine the atmosphere in this place then. It would have been total lift-off. And unfortunately, Milo is going to be seeing that moment running through his head as he tries to get to sleep tonight, knowing what could have been. That really should have been a goal, and there were other chances as well. Pukki had a shot saved after Norwich went direct, and McLean flicked on a Tim Krul goal kick. Josh Sargent fired over in the 18th minute as well, before Brentford took the lead in the 32nd minute from, again, a bit of familiarity. A corner from Christian Eriksen. Great to see him playing football again, of course, but that's not what we're here to talk about right now. It's flicked on by narrative Claxon, Chris Ayer, who Norwich tried to sign last summer from Celtic, but Brentford beat them to it because they were willing to stump up the 15 million, I think it was. I think he's 6'8", so it probably didn't matter who was trying to mark him, but it was Sam Byram who was supposed to be at the near post. He flicks it on. Tony reacts quicker than Brandon Williams at the back post and prods it in from close range, and that means they've got the 1-0 lead at half-time. This, for me, was a championship game in terms of quality. If you think of the matches we've watched recently, the Manchester City game, obviously 4-0 here, the 3-1 at Liverpool, and even the 2-0 at Southampton. That was proper Premier League quality Norwich are playing against. Your likes of De Bruyne, Salah, even James Ward-Prowse at Southampton. They were proper Premier League teams. Norwich actually made a decent fist and a decent effort of those games because they had to play well or they would get blitzed. This was a championship game. Brentford haven't really won it with quality other than perhaps Tony's persistence and strength and pace. That hat-trick takes him up to 9 goals for the season, I think it is, in the Premier League. So boosts his tally nicely. But ultimately, if you are going long, trying to flick on off from Kenny McLean's head, if you're relying on John Rowe coming off the bench as a teenager trying to kickstart his career, you're not staying in the Premier League, are you? And there's just no pretending that anything short of a miraculous turnaround now and a really, really impressive surge of form and is going to be needed to prevent Norwich going back to the Championship and the roller coaster ride continuing. Another Premier League relegation. That'll be 6, won't it? They already jointly hold the record with West Brom, if I'm remembering that correctly, for 5 in the Premier League era. And then it's back to seeing whether the fans have got the hunger for another championship campaign. I dare say many of us, by the time it gets to August, would be very hungry for it. And obviously there's a lot of ability in this squad. If it is still Dean Smith and if it is Stuart Webber and all these questions that we're going to be asking, there's clearly still Norwich are a very financially stable club and have got plenty of ability in that squad. They should be able to be in the promotion mix next season. But as we know, relegations can cause a lot of trouble. Things can become very tumultuous along the way, and then you can end up with a bit of a shell and trying to rebuild. And of course, last season was played with that bit of asterisk alongside it, wasn't it? Behind closed doors. As soon as they got that 1-0 win at Huddersfield, when Adam Eder got the late goal on the opening day, a lot of the worries were kind of forgotten about, and they started to grind their way back towards some form and some enjoyment. But we're going to have a lot of time to chunter over all of that sort of stuff, so I won't go too deep into what next season might bring, because what can we do? We can only hope that they put in a reaction and go and pull off a shock result against Chelsea on Thursday. It'd be interesting to see how many people turn up on Thursday night, given the unusual kickoff time and given the situation. It was full. I don't think we actually got given an attendance because it was a pretty chaotic second half. But by the end, there were big patches, and I felt more apathetic than angry at the end. There was plenty of boos. Players went straight down the tunnel, mostly. They just looked shell-shocked. There was no dramatic incident, really. Dean Smith and the coaching staff waited to sort of shake the hands of the players and try to get them back in the dressing room and crack on, I dare say. I just had a little bit of what Dean Smith was saying post-match, and he was complaining about the officials, but I had just had a look back, and I don't think they're the most contentious in the world. Perhaps the second one. I mean, the first one, Ben Gibson basically kicks a Brentford player in the head. His foot's above waist height at a corner. He can't do that. The second one is a bit soft, perhaps. It doesn't seem to be loads of contact, but he's going off his feet, diving in, trying to win the ball in the penalty area when Tony is quite wide, and he could have just kept shepherding him. I think he's just lost his head in that moment when Norwich are really shell-shocked. Again, that is probably the best word for it. So the actual position in the table, they're still 5 points adrift because Everton haven't played today. As I say, Leeds lost, Brentford got a thrashing. Everton played Tottenham Monday night, so we'll have to see. But they've got 3 games in hand, haven't we? So once again, I mean, the table's just irrelevant. Norwich have got 17 points. They've scored 16 goals in, 27 games. So it's irrelevant what anyone else does, what the table looks like. They are showing no signs of being able to do it. I'm struggling to put anything positive forward for you, I'm afraid, and I'm sure that's probably not the mood that anyone's in. I won't go through all of it, but yeah, that Tony goal in the 32nd minute, the first penalty comes in the 52nd minute. Which I just described, Gibson kicking Janssen in the head, I think it was, and then 6 minutes later, the second one. Both times Tony sends... the second time Krul did guess the right way, but Tony had put too much power on it. Tim had tried to whip up the river end and get everyone going, but that wasn't happening. The Norwich looked like they got back into it in the 69th minute. Rashica had a goal disallowed. That was because Pukki was offside. As McLean put the ball in from the right initially, Pukki was about half a yard offside. But all the players were back on the centre spot. Norwich, the crowd was sort of like, hang on, then maybe there's something happening here. I think it probably took about 2 minutes before the VAR actually ruled out the goal. It looks like it was just about correct, although play had moved on a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit debatable in terms of is it sort of second phase and things like that. But eventually the ball breaks kindly for Rashica and he smashes it bottom left corner. But that was cruel. That felt like salt being rubbed into the wound. So it was still 3-0. It was very nearly 4-0. Brian and Mbeumo had the ball in the net, but that was also disallowed. That was in the 76th minute. And that came from Brentford had tried to be clever with a throw in. Ethan Pinnock took it short, got the ball back, and then he was offside. His cross goes into the box, and eventually Mbeumo manages to sort of bundle it in with a mass of bodies in the 6-yard box. So we thought that was 4-0. Again, it took quite a while for the VAR decision to come through on that one, probably the best part of 2 minutes, which explains why there was 8 minutes added time. But that, again, looks to have been the correct decision. So it wasn't 4-0. Just before that, John Rowe had come on. That was the first change Dean Smith made, which was very surprising. I think he was probably wondering, is it fair to put what is he, 18, I think? Is it fair to put him on in this situation? You know, could turn pretty nasty and things. And at that point, we were waiting to see whether that is how it would turn out. But I'll give him a man of the match, almost ironically in a way, because like I say, Brentford had taken their foot off the pedal. But I'll give the lad 7 out of 10 because he sets up the goal and he showed bravery, he showed determination. For instance, when Mbeumo had picked up when they threw another ball onto the pitch, and Mbeumo had picked it up and was holding up play and time wasting. Rowe was straight in there, got the ball off him, was trying to get play going, showed urgency throughout, and the goal came from Rashica playing him into the left side of the box, showing a bit of determination to keep the ball, shimmy inside his man, and then dink across him, which Pukki volleyed in for his 7th of the season. But that was in the 2nd minute of added time. So the celebrations were sort of muted and ironic almost, but they did show a bit of fight. The other changes came in the 82nd minute, wasn't it? I'm just trying to find where I made that note. 82nd minute, Max Aarons and Lise Malou came on for Williams and Norman. And again, Lise Malou showed a bit of guile and a bit of attacking intent, but yeah, Brentford had eased off by that point. But should Lise Malou have been starting? Don't know. As I said at the top of it, Norwich did have chances. They could have taken control of this one. There was a couple of sort of harsh chances. Lise Malou floated across to Rowe at the back post that he couldn't quite stretch to reach. And another one where Lise Malou shot sort of landed kindly for Sargent, and he on the turn blasted it over, and that was in the 8th minute of added time before the misery finally ended. To look at the stats as well, just to emphasise that, like I'm saying, it's not like Norwich were totally horrendous today, almost maybe more psychologically the way it's worked out than their general play. And again, as I said earlier, didn't really feel like Premier League quality, but 60% of possession, 15 shots and 7 on target to 10 shots and 6 on target for Brentford. So a real action-packed game. Loads. We were struggling to keep up with it in the live blog, and as the way the comments all sort of dropped through, but by the time something else had happened, the comments were out of date, so I was struggling to sort of keep up with everything. But in terms of ratings, yeah, as I say, I'll give Roma man of the match and a 7, just sort of because he's the only one that did anything. But I think that has to be taken with a pinch of salt. So I think I'll go 5s for everyone, 4s for Hanley, Norman, and Sargent. I don't think Sargent affected the game. Norman either, not really got his rhythm, maybe did a few good things. Hanley in the build up to the second penalty, sort of rash charge forward to try and win the ball, and that left Gibson exposed, stepping out of the back line, trying to show sort of intent and things. But there were a few times where he was beaten by Tony. I don't think the Norwich defence had their best day today, and you've got to give Gibson a 3 in the end, haven't you? Because his mistakes have ultimately sort of killed Norwich off, and Brentford haven't had to be in top gear, but their fans certainly had a good day today, because that's pretty much them safe now, isn't it? And certainly Norwich aren't going to catch them. They're up to 30 points, if I'm remembering that correctly. I haven't got the table in front of me, but I think that will do. Thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry I can't make it a bit more positive, but that's the situation we're in. They are heading back to the Championship, the way things are heading. And, you know, how many times have we been here in the last decade? Relegation in 2014, 2016, 2020, looking to be 2022 as well. And it's just so frustrating. And the post-mortem will be long and hard and miserable. And I have to say, I'm dreading this final stages of the season as much as everyone else is. Whether you're in the press box, let's just hope it's not permeated into the dressing room, which would be very, very difficult for them to avoid, because they've got a real grim situation to navigate now. The only thing they can do is take it one game at a time, focus on Chelsea, focus on an upset, focus on a shock, and proving once again all that talk that we've heard about proving people wrong. You got to do it now. If they do not beat one of Chelsea or Leeds, it is very, very much done and dusted, and that final 9 games after the break is going to be utterly miserable. Try and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I guess what you think about if you want to kick off that post-mortem now. If you don't want to wait until it's all confirmed, then go for it. But as I say, we've got a long, long time to simmer over all of this. Thanks very much.